Hey everyone, it's the Kung Fu Genius, aka Alex Richter. If you're listening to us on audio only, I'd appreciate you reviewing and rating the podcast wherever you listen to it. And if you're watching us on YouTube, of course, if you like what I do here, don't forget to subscribe to the Kung Fu Genius and hit that bell for notifications. I have an announcement for Kung Fu Genius fans. Right now, for a limited time, you can get a 1-month all-access trial subscription to Wing Chun Illustrated magazine absolutely free. No strings attached after that free month either. Go to WCInewsstand.com to register in the upper right corner. Fill in your email and password and use the code KFGTRIAL to get 1 month free access to all the issues published from 2011 to the current issue. How cool is that? All the issues. And if you want that information again, it's in the description below. And with that, let's get started.
All right, peeps. On today's episode of the Kung Fu Genius, the genius is going to be answering all kinds of hot nonsense from YouTube. Lots of gems, lots of lang lang, lots of, yo, Donnie Yen, will you sign this cardboard box for me? Let's get to it.
He is unstoppable, unbeatable, unbelievable. He's Alex Richter, the Kung Fu Genius.
And every day, I practice martial arts.
Watch out!
Word is, I'm a Kung Fu genius. Practiced all day like a genius.
Yo, Dre, how you doing, man?
I'm all right, Sifu. I'm feeling a little different today.
You look a little different. You normally don't wear a Chinese jacket. I think that's what's different with you today.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
You're sporting a nice one.
Also decided, why don't we, I am the Kung Fu Genius, but I very rarely wear any traditional Chinese clothing. So I thought, okay, maybe I'll wear my, Tong Chong jacket with a little Lei Gong Man underneath. And I guess you had the same idea as me because you came rocking and rolling. So I think that's probably what looks a little bit different about you today.
Maybe.
Yeah.
How can I get one of them shirts?
One of these?
Yeah.
Ooh, Lei Gong Man. You got to go to Hong Kong. Because unfortunately, they don't really do mail order because they're like really old school. All they do is sell the same T-shirts and undergarments. And I think, not even sure if they do mail order, but it's easiest just to go to Hong Kong and buy it directly from them. So I wish they, like, how cool would it be if Lei Gong Man was like a sponsor of the Kung Fu Genius, right? That'd be amazing.
Yo, let's see, make it happen.
We'll try. Lei Gong Man, if you're out there, you're probably not watching the internet because I think you guys barely have a fax. But hey, sponsorship time. So anyway, here we are back for another AMA. And so what you got for me?
Drayson asked.
Drayson?
Drayson? Yeah.
That's weird.
Drayson.
That's weird. I'm having like a case of deja vu all over again.
Hey, Sifu. If back in the day, say like 50s or 60s, the old man, Yip Man, randomly got into a time machine, ended up here in New York City, asked around for the best Wing Chun school, and ended up here for the ITC last week, where would you take him around New York City? And if he asked you to smoke some opium, would you?
Jeez. How did you let that question get in? The whole thing about, like, the Kung Fu Genius AMA episodes are that you were supposed to screen all the questions. Now, this question curiously comes from someone with a name quite similar to yours. And the questions, this sounds kind of staged. Like someone is trying to put me on the spot. Smoking opium? What is it? Since I did that Bruce Lee drug letters episode, now, like, it seems that all people want me to talk about are drugs and drug-related topics. Isn't it weird? The #1 video of views and likes and everything is a drug video on the Kung Fu Genius. I don't know anything about that.
Speaking of which, our follow-up question comes from Sam Sapoli. He says you forgot to talk about the coke when you interviewed John Little.
Oh, man, that's another thing, too. Like, so I did the Bruce Lee drug letters. That was a one-off because that news hit on a weekend, and I was like, oh, man, this is crazy. And I wanted to do an episode, or not really an episode, but I wanted to release something before anyone else did, right? So I very quickly came in and recorded something, and I've talked about it on the last couple episodes, and I just read the letters and kind of asked people what they thought about it, right? Didn't realize that video was going to go totally ape shit and everyone was going to like it, right? Or like it or hate it or whatever. People were going to people were going to react so strongly to it, right? And then right after that, I had my interview with John Little, which was recorded 3 weeks before the Bruce Lee drug letters even came out.
And y'all had no clue.
We had no clue. I didn't have a clue. John Little didn't have a clue. And it was recorded before all this stuff came out. So that video happens to come out because, we're usually about 3 weeks ahead of the curve when we record these episodes. So that means that every time you're listening to this is like about 2 to 3 weeks old by the time you hear it. So the John Little one, the second John Little interview comes out where we talk about Bruce Lee's training methods. And we talk about Bruce Lee's loss of weight, which John talked about interstitial water weight because of the heat in Hong Kong, among other factors.
Interstitial.
And then, yeah, interstitial, right? One of your new favorite words. And all these comments came up like, yo, bro, how come you didn't talk about the cocaine? And also, like, one guy was like, well, I don't mean to, like, lift the veil off the big elephant in the room, but I don't understand why you guys are not talking about the cocaine. And, like, well, doesn't the cocaine explain, like, the body weight? And it's like, and what, it's understandable. Some people could make that mistake, but the sheer number of people who seem to have not realized that right after the intro, I had a disclaimer on the video. And it's like, these were shot before the Bruce Lee drug letters came out, which this kind of changes some of what we might think about some of these things. And you should watch that video for some context. And then it was like, there were people like, oh, you didn't talk about coke. I'm like, well, you didn't see the disclaimer. And they're like, and it's very funny when you catch people when they're wrong on something. Like whether it was, which is happening a lot because of the sheer number of comments. Like someone says something and you're like, well, like, for example, how come you didn't talk about the coke? And I'm like, well, this was recorded before then. I put the disclaimer there. And it seems like 1 out of 10 people who make a mistake like that will be like, oh, man, my bad. Sorry. Nine out of 10 people will just double down. Like, they realize that they got caught with their hand in the cookie jar or they got caught taking a crap on the floor. And they will just double down on it. And like, well, no, well, and it's like, dude, it's okay to be like, oh, you know what? Sorry, I missed it. But it's kind of like doubling. Like if I make a mistake in the comments or I misspeak or whatever, hey, just admit it, right? Or like, at the time when I said this, I didn't know what this was or whatever. Right. And so like because I had in one of the Bruce Lee drug letters, he talked about he was asking Bob Baker like, oh, can you get me psilocybin? All right. And psilocybin is like the active ingredient in mushrooms or something like that, right? Or whatever, right? I find this out because, of course, one thing, that's brutally apparent is that our viewers are very well educated on pharmacology, okay? So, people are like, well, psilocybin is actually just what the active ingredient in mushrooms or something like that, right? And because later in the drug letters, I referred to it as a designer drug. I'm like, oh, hey, Bob, I need this designer drug. It's not a designer drug, bro. This is just the active. And it's like, okay, I got it.
How do you all know this stuff?
Well, the funny thing is, like, what people don't realize, it's like 2,000-something comments in, bro, you're the 60th person to say that in the last 3 days. And I try to respond to everyone. But like just sometimes it's just not tenable and you just realize it's like people watch a video that's 3 weeks old and has thousands of comments and they think they're the first person to say something about that. It's really funny. I mean, for me, it's a new experience because like I said, there's like 6 people who listen to the Kung Fu Genius on a weekly basis. They might be very religious about it, but there's like 6 people. So the video comes out, the episode comes out. It's usually the same people commenting. It's our kind of hardcore fans and stuff.
Right.
But this was the first time I had a video that just reach went totally beyond our subscriber base, right? Because we don't even have like 3,000 subscribers on the Kung Fu Genius, but the video had like 30,000 views.
Making tens of dollars now.
Yes. And then some people, also accusing me of like trying to tarnish Bruce Lee's name, which is like, look, if you watch any of the other videos we've done on Bruce Lee, you'll totally understand. I have nothing but love for Bruce Lee. I mean, we did 4 parts where we just talk about a 20-minute phone conversation Bruce Lee had, and we did it in 4 frickin' parts, all right?
Got the man's photo on the wall.
I got the man right there, and like anyone who knows anything about me knows I'm a very hardcore Bruce Lee fanatic. We had Matt Pauly on. We had John Little on twice. I mean, Bruce Lee has a very deep meaning as far as my life is concerned, right? To quote Bruce Lee himself, right? And so when I did the video, I'm like, look, these letters came out. It's kind of like I feel like this is weird news, the whole drug letters thing, right? But you can imagine if weird news is going to come out, who would you rather have tell it to you, right? Especially like weird news about Bruce Lee. You want the MMA bros to talk about it, or you want the delusional fanboys to talk about it, right?
That Bloody Elbow was one
Yeah.
of the first to make a
Bloody Elbow did it, right? And they were pretty fair, but you know, their audience is like, so it's mostly like, hey, let's shit on Bruce Lee or something like that, right? Because that's what you're gonna have there. And then also like all the fanboys. You know, the number of people who comment, be like, I don't think Bruce was getting that for himself. I think he was just getting that for other people. And it's like, what you see is the 7 stages of mourning going on. You know what I mean? Like some people are in the denial stage, some people are in the bargaining stage, right? You know, just like when someone dies, like, well, maybe Linda needed a scale just because they were just selling those things. And it's so funny because it seems like Bruce is a drug user. No. Bruce is a drug pusher. Oh, okay. like it's interesting what people want to stigma. Not that either one of them should be stigmatized, but I'm just saying like it's interesting the way people bargain because it shows you what their kind of values are.
I can't help Sifu but think like trying to justify it by saying like, no, he wasn't using.
Yes.
He was just selling.
Yes.
Does that seem a little
No, it's
super
super
more sketch than the
it's
the
super
initial?
weird. There was one guy who literally kept trying. He would like comment bomb other threads, and he was like, "Well, he wasn't getting large amounts." It's like, first of all, these letters came out 3 weeks ago. Before 3 weeks ago, no one knew anything about this stuff, and everyone is like, "Oh, I already knew that. Yeah, there's that one photo he had a Coke spoon on his neck or what." It's like. Everyone suddenly knew about it after it came out. Before it came out, can you imagine if I made a video before all this came out and I was like, Bruce Lee was a total cokehead? Can you imagine what people would? Can you imagine the hate I would have gotten, right? And people would be like, no, you're crazy. And then the letters come out, right? And it's new for everyone. Yeah, we knew about the weed, we knew about the hash, we knew about this, but this was new. And even the top Bruce Lee biographers who studied this man for so many, most of them, I mean, I know them personally, most of them were floored by the news. So this idea that, Bumblecrack 62 on YouTube, oh, I was already talking about this in the early 2000s. People are like, oh, I was already talking about this. Great, send me the link. Where was the article? Where was the video? And they never answer that. Everyone knew about it in advance, but no one answered it, right? So I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to tell you this news, right? And then people are like accusing me of trying to like cash in on this stuff or whatever. Okay. I will, full disclosure, all right?
All right.
My YouTube channel is monetized, okay? Meaning that we get ad revenue and, Google gives us based on the views, right?
Tens of dollars.
Yes. And, but I don't earn a living from YouTube, okay? I don't earn a living from YouTube. I'm a professional martial arts instructor, all right? And I just do this for fun because I like talking about Kung Fu. I like talking about this stuff, right? That video, the Bruce Lee letters, is probably the most watched. I mean, it is the most watched video on my channel, right? In 3 weeks or whatever, something like 30-something thousand views, okay? Do you know how much money you get from YouTube for a video with 30,000 views?
How much, Sifu?
It's $100. $100. Now, $100 is not no money, all right? But when you start to look at YouTubers who will get like 1 million views in a couple days, you start to realize they're actually making money, all right?
Cash money.
For reference, most of our other videos, the views are in the thousands. 1,000, maybe 2,000, okay? So I have one video that made $100 in 3 weeks, okay? And that is my #1 killer, all right? All the other ones are 1,000 views. We still have like my Bobby Samuels episode hasn't even broken 1,000 views yet. All right. And that's I love that episode, right?
Y'all go show Sifu Samuel some love right now.
That's right. The Bobby
Pause
Samuels.
this episode and go show that one
That's
some
right.
love.
Stop watching this altogether, right? No, the Bobby Samuels, I mean, he was one of Sammo Hung's students, and we talk about his time living with Sammo Hung. It's like crickets chirping on that video, and that's a great video, right? There's even Kung Fu clips in that video, but my audience seems to either like Bruce Lee stuff or the Wing Chun stuff or just stuff about cocaine, right? Those seem to be the 3 killing topics. But like for people who think I'm making all this money off that thing, okay? At the time of this video, 30,000 views, a little bit over $100. And that is on a video that has far exceeded anything that any of my other videos have done. So when you look at like the other videos I make, maybe $10, maybe $15 on a video over the course of 2-3 months, all right? So these people that think like, oh, I'm sitting here twiddling my thumbs, earning all this crazy YouTube revenue. You know, my wife is always giving me shit because she's, you know, I was kind of very proudly showing her like, hey, look how much we're finally getting on YouTube. I've made $100 on YouTube. And she's like, worst hourly rate ever. She's like, the amount of time you spend editing these videos and, you know, going to the premiere and doing all this stuff. She's like, you're earning cents for the amount of time, for the hours you're putting in. So anyway, which is why I always like to joke when people say I'm earning all this money. I'm like, yes, tens of dollars, right? So,
I mean, I guess you'd say like controversy sells.
It does. It does. I mean, you know, I also the number of people who commented on that video without watching it. There were people like, I can't even watch this. Yet they comment on it, not realizing that every comment actually helps the algorithm. Or people tell me like, who cares about this? Is it? You cared enough to comment on it, and that literally helps the video. Like, it's so dumb sometimes, right? And of course, on the thumbnail, I'm like looking at, you know, I'm looking like this, so it looks like I'm going to talk some ish about Bruce Lee. But then you watch it, and I'm like, I'm kind of going through the process in real time, reading many of these for the first time, you know? So I don't think any reasonable person can watch it and think that it was some kind of hit piece on Bruce Lee.
Right. So, Sifu, I saw you made a special announcement recently. Maybe a big purchase you want to talk about?
Oh, big purchase, yes. That came off very smooth and very organic. Yeah, so a couple episodes ago, I talked about getting a place in Florida. And so we have gotten a place in Florida. So I have, you know, lots of students who like to come and visit and do training with me. But the problem is New York's kind of expensive. You know, you want to stay in a hotel for a couple weeks. It can cost a lot of money. So people who want to come and train with me, they usually have to stay or cut it a little bit short because it's really expensive to stay in New York. So I thought, well, why don't I figure out an alternate location for people to come and train with me? So we have, the wife and I have procured a small spot in Florida. And students who want to do in-person, like intensive private training with me can actually book that online at citywt.com, and you can fly to Florida and stay at the compound, so to speak. And there's a training area there that I'm going to put together, and you can come and train with me. So yeah, if you don't think New York is cool enough, you can hang out with me in Florida.
You know, there's if only we had a Florida man here.
Yeah, if only we had a Florida man. But I generally think a Florida man usually brings down the whole thing a little bit, right? So I'm still a New Yorker. I might have property in Florida, but I am not a Florida man. I don't care what other Florida men say.
All right. So I got questions.
Okay.
You got answers.
Let's go. Let's do it.
First question comes from Southern Chain Puncher.
Nice handle.
Dear Sifu Genius,
That's a new one.
what are the takeaway lessons from The Wooden Dummy in a Nutshell? Also, I've heard you list the books you plan to release. Why not a book on the weapons? Love your work. You're an excellent apologist for LTWT and very much appreciate what you're doing.
Wow. Well, thank you, Southern Chain Puncher. So it's actually a couple things in there. So the first one was about the wooden dummy in a nutshell. That would be a very small wooden dummy. Okay, no. So what is the idea of the wooden dummy in a nutshell? Well, I would say the overriding idea, at least in WT, the way it's presented, is to simplify your movements. Wing Chun is already a style that is a very simple structure, very straightforward, very direct. But the wooden dummy techniques in general tend to simplify a lot of the transitions so you can move more efficiently than someone who hasn't learned it. That's a basic overall idea. Obviously, there are other ideas in there, improving your position, structure, timing, your ability to exert power while you're sticking, not just when you punch, but actually from a sticking position. Those are things that are there. And the different sets all tend to have their own themes. I mean, I could probably do a whole TED talk on the different themes in the various sets. But yeah, in a nutshell, it's simply to simplify and to help one generate power and improve angles of movement. What was the second part there?
Heard about books you plan on releasing. Why not a book on the weapons?
Yes. So, well, my next book is on the wooden dummy, which I'm excited. Man, I feel like this whole episode's one big plug for everything I'm doing, which it's not, and that was not intentional. Okay, so yes, I don't really plan on publishing a book on the weapons, and although I'm kind of a bit of a modernist when it comes to Wing Chun, there's still things I'm still kind of old school about certain things, and the weapons kind of are traditionally not taught as openly as the rest of the system, and I think that's okay. It's not like, oh, I'm hiding it because it's a big secret or you don't want people to see it or whatever. But I just think that there's something nice about having gone through the steps to learn the Wing Chun system from your teacher or whatever that means. It's a little bit different from everyone. And then kind of have to earn that a little bit. And I think that that's still a good thing. And I like that. Plus, I already have a number of book projects planned, and so I have plenty of things to write about without resorting to the weapons. So,
All right.
yeah. And as far as being an apologist for LTWT, that's interesting. I never thought of it that way. I wouldn't say I'm really an apologist for WT. The WT organization and my former teacher, they have their own issues, and I try to help people give them a little bit of context about things to maybe, sometimes for some people he's like a villain, for some people he's this, that, or whatever. I try to give a slightly fairer take on it. I don't know if that's really being an apologist for it. I left him about 10 years ago, and I've continued to streamline the methods. I'm still teaching WT, but I wouldn't say that I'm an apologist for Larung Tang, but if people want to see me that way, that's up to them, I suppose.
So our next question comes from Jane Yuan Moy. All right. I have a question for
I
the
love
next.
how you can never say the names right, Trey. It's amazing.
I have a question for the next Ask the Kung Fu Genius episode. I'm interested in Moy Yat because he shares my last name, Moy. I heard about his death in 2001. Other than he was a Wing Chun Sifu, I can't find why he's so important. Do you know more about him?
Oh, that's a really good question. So, well, as someone who teaches Wing Chun here in New York City, there's kind of a hierarchy within the martial arts world just within New York. Because I'm like, even though now I've been teaching for nearly 20 years, I'm still kind of the new kid on the block, which is amazing. I mean, New York has a very rich Chinese martial arts history, and a lot of that stuff even predated me being around. So Sifu Moy Yat was one of Grandmaster Yip Man's middle period students, and was a close student of Grandmaster Yip Man. And he was one of the first guys to teach Wing Chun in New York City in the very early 70s. And he had, I believe, the first actual brick and mortar Wing Chun school in New York. So in terms of him being kind of like an OG, he deserves that place. Like for New York, he's like one of the first, if not the first, proper Wing Chun Sifu teaching here in New York City. And his school was like a staple of Chinatown martial arts. And so he has that. In addition to him being one of the first, he also happened to be a very well-respected student of Grandmaster Yip Man. So he had a lot of students. A lot of his students have gone on to teach, including his son, William Moy, whom I met before. I believe he teaches in Brooklyn. And so you have a lot of Moy Yat lineage people within New York, so they're very well established here, as well as other parts of the States and also in Brazil. So in addition to him being kind of one of these first guys, he also was an artist. He did paintings. He did those chops.
Nice.
Where he took the traditional Wing Chun sayings, the samfat, and then put them onto these blocks, and they were called kun, and a lot of people know about those as well. So it was kind of a kind of block style Chinese writing, writing the old Chinese characters for the Wing Chun mottos. So he was kind of one of the first, I think, to kind of write a bunch of those down. And so obviously, there's a lot to respect for him because we were very lucky here in the States that we had someone of his caliber to kind of come in and teach. And so I have a number of friends from the Moy Yat lineage. My old podcast partner, Big Sean, trained within the Moy Yat lineage, his Sifu Tom Kagan. I just interviewed him on Dudes of Kung Fu about a month ago. So, so when I first started teaching, I didn't really have a lot of contact with a lot of the other Sifus. I was kind of busy building my own school. But slowly over time, I've met more and more people from the different lineages. And I think now, because Chinese Kung Fu is a lot smaller than it used to be in the 80s and 70s, a lot of the Kung Fu people in New York tend to be a lot more friendly with each other. I think in the 80s, there was like a lot of wars going on between the various Kung Fu factions. And I think now Kung Fu is kind of so small in New York that we all tend to be a lot more friendly to each other than maybe our predecessors were back in the day.
Next question's coming from our man, Daniel Law.
Daniel Law. All right. Law.
L-O-H. Law.
Oh, L-O-H. Oh, okay. Law.
Law.
All right. Okay, good.
Hi, Sifu, Richter, and team. Some AMA questions if you don't mind answering. What are your views / understanding on what seems to be the difference, not only sequences of movements, but seemingly also in the expression of some of the techniques, to the wooden pole form between, one, on the one hand under the Lung Ting lineage, as seen in video at youtube.b/LQVFK5FZFGQT equals 534 from 8 minutes and 35 seconds in. And two, on the other hand, with other lineages like Shu Shongtin, such as YouTube video YXD_UH8DKWS Wang Shenglong, as seen in this YouTube video.
3 hours later.
Seen snippet as YouTube because BKLV, and his southern
3 hours later.
which should be from the Lung Ting lineage, seen YouTube by XWA, all which look to have more in common with each other than with Lung Tings.
3 hours later.
For example, I noticed how Lung Ting performed at YouTube.
3 hours later.
So Kukwan, if the terminology used is correct, as covering block but also dissolving energy, as compared to how single block seems, seemingly would have applied a similar looking technique at YouTube video link ZLNZCZUZMHO-equals 168 at 2 minutes and 48 seconds, which looks more towards engaging low attacks. Thanks for answering above, if you don't mind. As you may tell, above questions come from a viewpoint that is learning from the Lung Ting lineage and therefore knows less about the rest.
Huh?
Moving on. Joe Smith. Wallbag equals Makawari. I'm surprised, with all the talk of sweating and heat, you didn't ask John about Bruce getting his sweat glands removed in November of 72.
Yeah, that's another thing too. Like, whenever you do something like, like I did the John Little interview, we talked about Bruce Lee's training methods, and we talked a lot about the loss of interstitial water weight, right? And then, of course, you talk to someone for an hour, and when you're done talking with them, what do you do after? You go, oh man, forgot to ask him about that. Oh man, could have talked about that. Because when you start to go down the rabbit hole that is Bruce Lee, in whatever phase of his life you're talking about, there is no way you can be exhaustive in everything you're talking about in an hour, right? You're going to miss something, you're going to forget to talk about something, right? The one thing I'm going to say, though, is that, Bruce's water weight drop, where he's getting kind of a little more shredded. He's the most shredded in Enter the Dragon, right? So we could say that's post sweat glands operation. So everyone's like, oh, you didn't talk about the sweat glands thing or whatever, right? And I'm like, okay, we talked about 20 other things that most other people don't talk about when they talk about Bruce Lee, and I talked about it with one of the foremost experts, right? So you're always going to miss something, right? And again, why did I not talk about cocaine? Recorded 3 weeks before all that stuff came out, right? But the loss of water weight predates him removing his sweat glands. So
Right.
if he removed the sweat glands, let's say sometime late 72, November, whatever, well, he was already a lot more cut by his first film, by his second film, than what we were used to seeing in terms of he was a lot more striated, right? So the sweat gland removal could explain, I don't know, perhaps it could explain. For me, it actually doesn't explain. How do you lose more water when you're not able to sweat it out, right? So I mean, like, it just seems like it just seems like, okay, so now he can't sweat out, but now somehow in his last film he's got less water weight without the ability to sweat out more water. So I don't know. I'm not a trained medical profession. Anything I would tell you about Bruce's medical condition, I'm an idiot. Okay, this is not my area of expertise, right? I don't know why people think that just because we know a lot about Bruce Lee that we can, wax poetic on, the adrenal system or something like that, right? Just because you read Tom Bleeker's book, like, oh, let me tell you about the state of Bruce's kidneys at the time that he died. You know what I mean? It's like that. It's like making too many assumptions. So I don't know how that factors in, because Bruce's loss of interstitial water weight, which is my new favorite term to say, seems to predate the removal of the sweat glands. And as a total medical idiot, I don't know how removing one's sweat glands would make you hold less water. Right? Like I would assume it would be but again, I don't know. It could be, maybe if you take away certain sweat glands, you sweat more in other places. All right. Bruce might have been, after he removed his armpit sweat glands, he might have been, a perfusive neck sweater. Maybe his ankles started to sweat double the amount after he removed. I literally don't know how it works. Anyone who wants my opinion on Bruce's pituitary system or glands or whatever, you're going down the wrong road with that, son.
Pituitary genius.
Pituitary genius. I'm barely the kung fu genius.
Wait. Yo, Sifu, you still haven't answered that question from Dreisen.
I did answer that question. It was a nonsense question. Well, where would I take?
No.
Well,
where would you take the old man around NYC?
Where would I take the old man around NYC? Well, I would assume, Grandmaster Yip Man being a more or less very traditional Chinese man, he doesn't want to go to time. Maybe you show him Times Square. You go, hey, look at this. This is probably going to blow your mind because you're from the 60s and the 70s, right? You probably never seen anything like this, okay? And then I'd probably just take him to Chinatown for something to eat. Where else are you going to take him here?
Angela Mouse? He would like that.
Did you write this question?
No.
Are you Dreisen?
No.
Okay, because I think you wrote the question,
random.
and I think you're answering your own question.
How?
I think you just want me to say I would take him to Angela Mouse.
It's a great place.
It is a great place.
A lot of people questions about movies, kung fu movies.
Great. I love kung fu movies.
They want to know. They want your opinion on them. But I don't think a lot of our listeners know that you actually have been on another show recently talking about kung fu movies.
That's right. Yeah, here on YouTube, the Fat Samurai channel. That's Fat PHAT.
PH.
All right, so people don't go to the wrong Fat Samurai. Just an actual Fat Samurai. The Fat Samurai channel is a great channel. He does lots of movie stuff, but not just kung fu. He also does horror. He does a bunch of different genres.
Nice.
And he's great. He's absolutely great. And he's one of the shows that he does is called Versus, where they have kind of two shows battling each other. And I talked a little bit about it on the last episode. So, people tend to ask me what my opinion is on certain films. And I've already done a few episodes of Versus. Now, mind you, it's not on this channel, as much as I just want to drive traffic here. But, hey, Preston over at the Fat Samurai channel, he's amazing. And, would love for people to go over there and watch that stuff. It's usually every Thursday night. I don't do every single episode because with my teaching schedule and my other responsibilities, I can't always do it. And then occasionally they'll do they did one episode was The Rock versus Con Air. And I just feel, even though I have opinions on all those movies, I just feel it's a little out of the Kung Fu Genius wheelhouse. So I'll let other people take my slot on that one, and I'll actually watch and comment live. And they always laugh hey, how come you're not on the show tonight? And I'm like, no. When it's about Kung Fu, I'll do it, right? So we've done Yip Man versus Prodigal Son. We did 8 Diagram Pole Fighter versus Legendary Weapons of China. And I think we have a few more coming down the pipe.
Nice.
The Versus show is usually on Thursday nights. He live streams it. Right. And then, of course, if you missed the live stream, you can always watch the episode afterwards. And speaking of live stream, Mikey Deane, our embattled sound man.
Mikey.
Is that the best way to describe him? He is setting up the studio here so we can start doing live streams. So I think moving forward to the future, I would like one episode of the KFG a month, to be an actual live stream where we can, it's basically the same AMA, Ask Me Anything episode format, but we do it live, which means that that's one episode out of the month that I don't have to edit. Because we could just record it live and then it'll be on YouTube ready to go. So I look forward to that. Maybe a question for our audience members, because we do have a bunch of people who listen on the European side, and then obviously we have a lot of fans here in America and elsewhere. What time do you guys want me to do a live stream at? Do you want a Friday live stream? You want a Wednesday live stream? You want a Monday live stream? And what time here on the East Coast of the U.S. would you like me to do that? So we'll do an informal poll in the comments. Maybe I'll also put a poll in on the YouTube channel here so that people can let us know, because my schedule is pretty flexible, so we just need to figure out a time so we can do it. We do it once a month. If people really like it, maybe we'll do it more. Maybe we'll even do a show format where, once a week we talk Kung Fu movies. Another week we talk Wing Chun and talk martial arts or whatever. So, so let me know what people, would love for our fans to let us know what they would like us to do for the live streams.
Comment
Comment
on the
below.
YouTube. That's dope. Hey, who you doing that show with, by the way?
You the Fat Samurai?
Yeah.
So usually Rick Myers, the OG of Hong Kong film experts, he's there, and there's everyone else. So Frank Cheng is also there. Frank Cheng does commentaries for, I think, Eureka Films and 88 Films.
Master of Remaster.
Master of Remaster, and Frank Cheng's amazing. His knowledge is unbelievable. So they're always there, and it's always great just to sit back and listen to their takes on things. And then the rest of the panel tends to rotate between different people. So there's Eric the Asian film enthusiast. He's on there as well. And lots of and Kyle Wong, who's a director in his own right. So, and then they're usually there, and then like the other people will tend to kind of rotate out.
Like
so it's
star-studded event of Kung Fu knowledge right
it's
there.
like a star-studded box of chocolates. You never know what you'll get.
Speaking of boxes,
Oh God,
you got a box over there.
you threatened that of asking me about this story, and now you've done it. You want to know about the box in the corner?
I'm just saying, you got a box in the corner. It's got an autograph on it and everything.
It's high time, Seagull.
Yeah, so here at the Kung Fu Genie studio, right here by the window, there's a small cardboard box. And it's been here for a very long time, and occasionally people ask me about it. So for those of you who are watching this podcast as opposed to listening to it, I can show you here. It is a cardboard box, and it has got some Wing Chun logo on it and insignias, double knives. We turned it over here. It says Yip Man 3, so it's actually for promotion of the third IP Man movie way back in 2015. And
Been that long.
so there's a story about this box. And so I've never told this story before. I did allude to pieces of it, I think, occasionally on the Dudes with Big Sean. So back in the day, I guess now it would be around 2015, I was asked as a favor to a friend of mine, who's in Hong Kong. I was asked as a favor to go here to Midtown because they were shooting something for the movie for Netflix, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon 2. And although the film had already been shot, they were shooting a music video for the movie for promotion,
Nice.
right? And the music video, the guy playing the music is a very famous piano player named Lang Lang. All right, Lang Lang apparently is like I believe he's Taiwanese. I could be wrong. Like world class, world famous pianist. All right, and they're shooting a video, and they actually needed some kung fu people for that, and they contacted me for that. I actually recommended Takwah Eng from Chinatown, from the Black Tiger style, and
Sifu Paul.
Yeah, he's Sifu Paul Sifu, right? and so whom I've known him for many years, and I recommended that they use him and also Kelly Feng, who's one of his students, like, because they needed someone with swords. So I'm like, oh yeah, I don't do the fancy looking kung fu, right? I'm the Wing Chun guy, right? But like, if someone needs someone who can, twirl swords and do all that really cool stuff, I know like the people who do that. So I recommended, and I'm very happy they got some paid gigs out of it. Nice. And then once I had done that, I'm like, okay, fine. I sent a couple of people their way, and then on the day of the shoot or whatever, I get a text which is like, Donnie Yen has a favor to ask, all right? And he's not asking me directly. He's asking my friend in Hong Kong, who is then in turn asking me to fulfill this. So it's not like, oh yeah, Donnie Yen asked me for a favor. This is like, he asked a favor of someone, and then that someone asked me if I could fulfill it, okay?
All right.
And the favor was this. I had to go to the place where they're shooting the music video for Crouching Tiger and get in there and meet Lang Lang, and with my phone, we all have video cameras on our phone, shoot Lang Lang congratulating Donnie Yen on Yip Man 3. All right. So basically, put a camera in his face and, Lang Lang, can you just say something nice to Donnie Yen? And then Donnie would post it, I assume, on his Instagram or his Facebook or something like that. And basically, Lang Lang would, go like, oh, maybe something in Chinese, something in Mandarin, like, oh, congratulations to my good friend Donnie on, your new film, Yip Man 3, and I wish you all success. And, the very kind of typical Chinese good wishes kind of thing, right? And then so I would need to film this thing, and then I would send it to my friend, who would in turn give it to Donnie. And in return, I was told, all right, and again, sometimes with the game of telephone, one guy says this, one guy says that, but I was told that Donnie said, in return for doing this, he would give me a little video shout out to City Wing Chun.
Nice.
So like, hey, if you guys are in New York and you want to train Wing Chun or whatever, go train with Sifu Alex or something like that. Nice. Go to City Wing Chun or whatever.
IP man promotion.
Yes, and I'm like, hey, you can't get better than that to have like one of the number one action stars in Asia, the guy who plays Yip Man, to give a shout out to my Wing Chun school here in New York. So I'm like, okay, normally for these kind of errand type things, I'd probably send somebody, but I'm like, you know what? The Kung Fu genius should do this himself, right? So I go over there to the place where they're shooting, and Lang Lang's not there, and apparently I have to wait, according to the instructions, I have to wait for Harvey Weinstein to come by.
Yo.
Yeah. Now,
Lee
mind
Harvey.
you. Yes, Lee Harvey. Yeah, Lee Harvey. No, Harvey Weinstein. Now, mind you, this is that was, I guess, 2 years before all that stuff came out. So this is not post that era. This is before that time, right? So I'm like, okay, great. So I'm basically told I have to go to where the music video is being shot. I have to wait. For some reason, I have to see Harvey Weinstein and tell him that I'm there to meet Lang Lang. I don't know why I have to go to him and not to someone lower on the totem pole, but apparently he was there, and I'm supposed to say hi to him or whatever, right? So I get there, Lang Lang is not there, and Harvey Weinstein isn't there. So I'm there sitting, all right? Now, I normally have Kung Fu Genius stuff to do, right? I don't normally have a chunk of 4 hours in my day to just kind of sit around somewhere in Manhattan, but I'm like, all right, if I can get this promotion, this promotional video from Donnie Yen, for doing this thing for him, hey, it's totally worth 4 hours of my time, right?
Right.
Because just think of the views and the likes, right? Maybe I would have gone viral before having had to do a video about cocaine, right? Maybe, had Donnie Yen just done that and my online presence would have taken off, maybe I never would have needed to do the cocaine letters video.
You never know. It's
so
like
it all comes back to this day, right?
Butterfly effect.
The butterfly effect,
Maybe
right?
those cocaine letters would have never come out.
They wouldn't have come out, right? Everything would have changed, right? So anyway, I'm waiting there. Lang Lang's not there. Harvey Weinstein isn't there, and I'm just sitting there. And there's some actors coming by. I recognize them from the TV show Glee because my wife watched that. And I was like, oh, I think that person's from Glee or something like that, right? I cannot tell you what their names were. Anyway, after about 2-3 hours, Harvey Weinstein comes in. And I'm a little nervous because, mind you, this is all all that stuff coming out. But I'm like, hey, Harvey Weinstein, one of the most famous producers in Hollywood. I'm thinking like Pulp Fiction. I'm thinking, Shakespeare in Love, all these like great movies that are like, wow, the guy's coming in, right? And I remember he walked in, and I I didn't really know what Harvey Weinstein looked like. Like, obviously, I knew who Harvey Weinstein was. And I remember Googling him before he came because I didn't want to, like, run into him and not know that was Harvey Weinstein. 'Cause
Right.
he was just a name. And I'm like, okay, what does he look like? All right, he's kind of this, this guy who looks like, he looks like the sidekick on Curb Your Enthusiasm. I forget that guy's name. And that guy, they did an episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm where everyone thinks he's Harvey Weinstein. He's like, I'm not Harvey Weinstein, right? And I'm thinking like, oh, he kind of looks like, I can see why people would confuse him. So his name totally escapes me now. So anyway, I'm sitting there and he walks in and I recognize him because I recently just Googled him. And I just remember he was wearing like these, he's a heavy set guy. Right. He was wearing these really sloppy jeans and this like, white kind of really dirty button shirt kind of half tucked in. I mean, he looked like an absolute slob. And I remember my first impression was like, this, excuse me, this is one of the most powerful men in Hollywood. I mean, he just like, if the guy walked down the street and you didn't know he was Harvey Weinstein, you wouldn't even look twice at the guy, right? Something like, okay. And I remember on his arm, he had like one sleeve rolled up and he had like the cotton ball and the Band-Aid where clearly he had blood drawn that day. It's like, and he was holding, I think, a McDonald's bag with food in it. So it's like he's all sloppy. He's got like this Band-Aid where he had blood drawn. He's holding a McDonald's bag. And he has like these two relatively attractive female, I assume they're like, not PAs, interns, right? That are kind of like following him or whatever. And he walks in, he goes, wait right here. And then he goes right to the bathroom. And he's in there for like 20 minutes. And I'm just like he comes in, I'm like, I stand up like, hello, Mr. Weinstein. He's like, okay, wait right here. Goes right into the bathroom. Another 20 minutes. He comes out. Oh, okay, you shoot something with the Lang Lang, right? Okay, yeah, okay. All right, so I'm going to tell his people like that you can come in, right? So I'm like, all right. And then finally I get to meet Lang Lang, right? And so he's in this room and he's in there with like his assistant or whatever, who seemed to be overly obsessed with her phone when I came in, right? And then we shot it. And I even had a camera guy with me who I'm like, let's make sure we do a good job. And he shot on his phone. He had a really super good job. He cleaned it up. I think we shot one or two takes. Yeah, very professional, right?
Nice.
Of Lang Lang doing this great little, congratulations to Donnie. And so then finally after 4 hours, I'm like, okay, I leave. I'm like, all right, okay, cool. I hate wasting time. All right. I hate, like, for me, that was 4 hours out of my day. I could have been teaching. I could have been training, could have been with my kids. And I was sitting there like, at a table with craft food services just waiting. Anyway, I'm like, but it's Donnie Yen. I'm going to get a promotional shout out. I'm super excited about that, right? So I go and I send it to the person who asked me for the favor and like, so he's going to send it to him and whatever. And then, now we're playing the waiting game. So I'm hoping, in the next week or two, I'm going to get this, little 10-second clip from Donnie Yen and that's all I need.
Right.
Nothing happens.
Nothing
happens. And I'm like going, all right, okay. And like, what am I don't have the direct line to Donnie. So it's like, and I'm not going to like go in his comments and start, I'm not like that guy. Like, yo, man, I did a favor for you, right? And then like all this Harvey Weinstein stuff comes out. And then I'm like, I don't even want to tell the story now because like, it's like, especially, now it's a few years after, right? So now I can like, I can tell people, yeah, this is what happened. This happened before. But like, there were a few years where I'm like, all right, what am I going to do? Be like, yo, man, I had to meet Harvey Weinstein for you, bro. And you were supposed to do this video for me and you didn't do it. I was like, all right, whatever. Water under the bridge. And then I eventually go to Hong Kong. And while I'm in Hong Kong, the person who asked me for the favor felt bad that, Donnie didn't fulfill his end of it or whatever. And he goes, well, okay, let me give you something as a consolation prize. I don't know. All right. And the consolation prize, as you can see, for those of you watching the podcast, I know those of you who are listening, you can go on YouTube later and watch. So you see, it's a very nice cardboard box, promotional Yip Man 3, and look, it's signed by Donnie Yen himself.
Yo, autograph.
And this is the box for the Yip Man 3 mug, the official licensed Yip Man 3 mug. The box is signed by Donnie Yen, and when you open the box, There is nothing inside. I didn't even get the lousy mug that came in this box. I got the box, but it's signed by Donnie Yen, but it's empty.
Yo.
So I leave this box, this signed by Donnie Yen box, proudly in my office, playing the waiting game for whenever people want to ask me, yo, what's up with that box? And now I'll tell them the story. Or probably after now, I'll just refer to this episode of the podcast. Like, just watch it. I don't feel like telling the story again. So anyway, thanks, Donnie.
Thanks, Donnie. That's cold.
Yeah, well, you know, look, he's probably busy. And who knows why he didn't do it. Maybe he was busy. You know, to be totally fair, I don't actually remember him using the video on his social media. So maybe he got the video and maybe he didn't think it was any good, or maybe he didn't want to use it, or maybe him and Lang Lang aren't friends anymore. Like, I have no idea, right? So I'm not trying to throw any shade on him or whatever, but I'm just saying, I waited for 4 hours. I had to shake Harvey Weinstein's hand. He was super gross and super bloated. I wasted an entire afternoon, and I got a cardboard box with his signature on it. So
Got
anyway.
something. Speaking of getting something.
Wow. I'm going to tell you, Dre is the transition or segue genius.
Yeah, that's an unfortunate turn of phrase, isn't it? It was just KFG after dark.
All right, go ahead.
A buddy from Instagram, Airborne97, has a question for you.
All right, let's shoot.
If the Bruce Lee estate contacted you and said you could have one item, any item, what would it be?
Well, that's a difficult question. I mean, I think reflexively, and I think I might have answered it on Instagram, but now that I hear the question out loud, I don't think my answer was correct. I would like to have, because if it's one thing, then what I'm asking for is not one thing. I would love to have his training notes. Because for me, that's the most fascinating. Like, Bruce Lee's an amazing rabbit hole that you can go down, because there's so many aspects about Bruce Lee that are fascinating in their own right. Like, you can get into the movie stuff. You can get into his martial arts stuff. You can get into his development, his training, all those kind of things. Like, you can just go into a rabbit hole of one thing about Bruce Lee, right? And go into it super deep at the expense of going into any of the other aspects of his life. And although I'm like a huge fan of his films, I'm a huge fan of like his time in Hong Kong and all those kind of things. I mean, his martial arts development and his thoughts on martial arts and his notes on martial arts are, quite honestly, they're the things that fascinate me the most. As much as I can tell you about where they shot all these different things for Enter the Dragon and these background stories between him and stuntmen, like, I can tell you all that stuff. But like, honestly, it's the martial arts stuff that I'm most interested in. And so I have, and I never mentioned this before, but Big Sean, he, my former podcast, my late podcast partner from Dudes of Kung Fu, Big Sean always had such a big heart, and he always would kind of give stuff and gifts and he always kind of got you the thing that you didn't know you want. Like, he got you the thing that was perfect. And years ago, when we first became friends, he goes, I have something, I think you'll really like it. Okay. And I don't know how he got it, but they are original scans of Bruce Lee's notes. They're not copies. It's not out of a book. The scans are in color. You can even see the lined paper it's written on and the bluish tint of the paper that it's on. So when you look at them, you know, obviously I know that they're scans, but like if I just put it down on, you would look at it and it would look like the actual notes, because they're in color and they're clearly scans. They're not even color copies. They're literally scans from the original ones. Now, Sean was also a huge fan of like Bruce Lee's notes and kind of looking into that stuff. And he wasn't a Bruce Lee fanboy. He was a Jeet Kune Do man. Like, he was into that. And this cross section of notes that he gave me, it's about 10 pages. And according to Sean, he believes these were kind of the most important ones, at least the ones that he had access to or he was able to get. And it's Bruce's breakdown of the 5 ways of attack. One page of it is literally Jeet Kune Do drawn as if it were a graph. Like, this is Jeet Kune Do. You have the attack, you have the counter, you have all this, and it's like done in a tree branch way, like if this, then this, if this, then this, if this happens, then this happens. So it was like he had sketched out his kind of way of thinking and moving and fighting in a very systematic way. And those are included in the notes. Now, what's fascinating is that most of them are in English, but there's a bunch of stuff that's in Chinese. And when I started to look at Bruce Lee's notes, a lot of the stuff, like he would write stuff in English and there'd be stuff in the corner that was in Chinese.
Right.
A lot of the stuff that's in Chinese, the English stuff is not a Chinese translation because Bruce doesn't need to translate it for himself. So he's writing in English, and then when he wants to write shorthand really quickly, he'll write in Chinese. So that means that the stuff that's in Chinese is not the stuff that's in English. It's other stuff. And most of the stuff that's written in Chinese is about Wing Chun or relating to Wing Chun.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
That's how he'd be thinking about it.
Exactly, right? And like in his mind, I always felt that because you'll notice in Bruce Lee's notes, he'll write some of the Chinese terminology like Pak Sao or the names of the kicks and stuff. But he didn't really like doing that because he has to transliterate that into English. So he would basically, I mean, there are examples of him putting Chinese terminology into the alphabet, but it seems that because he learned Wing Chun in Chinese, obviously, because he learned over there, that the shorthand for him to write stuff about Wing Chun was literally just to write it in Chinese because that's how he learned it, that's how he knew it, right? He didn't know it, although he would write like Pak Sao, like maybe P-A-R-K or P-A-K-S-A-U, but for him to just write the 2 Chinese characters, Pak Sao, is much easier for him than for him to have to like transliterate that into, you know, our alphabet. Right. So it's all the Chinese stuff is stuff that's not in the English notes. And so when I started to like translate that stuff, I was like, oh, he's talking about this. He's comparing this to Wing Chun. He's comparing this to this. And you have like, it's almost like you have his notes and the Chinese are the DVD commentaries of his notes.
Any juicy bits?
Well, in some of them, it's relating, like he'll write, let's say, notes, and these are not necessarily in the notes that Sean gave me. I noticed these in general from some other copies and things that I've seen. He'll write maybe notes on other martial arts. Let's say what he thinks about this style, that style. Or maybe he's just writing notes on boxing or whatever. And in the corner, what he writes in Chinese is like how he would defend against it. So it's kind of like he's writing in English because he's most likely reading a book that's in English and writing the shorthand notes from that book in English because he's reading in English. And then his shorthand on the side is in Chinese, what he would do against the thing that he's writing about. And so then you start to see that he was constantly in a process of like, wow, what is this? This is interesting. What are these guys about? And trying to kind of get all of that essence out of the book that he's reading or whatever notes he's taking. And then in the side, it's like, okay, so now what do I think about this? How does this relate to what I'm doing, right? And so that's fascinating. Now, of course, the question was if I could get one thing, right? So obviously his notes are voluminous, right? It's not one thing, right?
He's a pretty prolific writer.
Very prolific writer. Wrote lots of notes, lots of letters, lots of stuff. He wrote a lot, okay? Which I'm sure is also, you know, maybe certain members of the estate right now maybe wish he had written a little less on certain things, right? So anyway, but let's say, okay, the notes don't count because I'm supposed to have one thing.
One thing.
All right, well then I would like to have something Bruce Lee wore, you know, like not because something that I could also wear. Like, just because, you know, you feel that connection, right? Maybe it's a watch or maybe not a T-shirt because if I put on one of Bruce Lee's T-shirts, I would rip through. First of all, the thing's 50 years old, so it's probably a bit threadbare at this point. And, you know, I'd put it on and rip that thing like the Hulk and that would be the end of it. But yeah, maybe like, you know, maybe that famous necklace he wears on the DJ spinning shirt that, you know, like the Jeet Kune Do logo one. Yeah. Something like that. Or maybe a pair of his sunglasses or one of his watches or, you know, another necklace that he might have wore, right? Like something like that. Because if you're not gonna get the notes, which quite honestly, that's the most interesting thing for me, then get a personal effect. So you say, hey, this was Bruce Lee's watch.
Just wanted a pair of those sunglasses he had.
Yeah, yeah.
Those things were slick.
Yeah.
I think the Lee estate started.
They did some
replicating.
replicas, yeah. They've done, yeah, and those are some of the better things that the Lee estate has done. Because most of what the Lee estate sells, Bruce Lee bobbleheads and Be-Water flip-flops, and it's
That Bruce T.
yeah, they need to, the Lee estate, in my opinion, needs to, you need to sell the bobbleheads and, like, you know, the figurines, and, like, people like that stuff. Don't get me wrong. I mean, look, they wouldn't be selling it if that stuff didn't sell. But I think that they should also have, like, some stuff that also caters to, like, the more hardcore fans,
Right.
you know, like more limited edition stuff that is like, you know, from his notes. Like, why doesn't the Lee estate literally just publish a book of scans of his notes? Like, rather than having, like, you know, John Little put a lot of his notes in the books and talked about that and put that together. Why not literally just put together a book of the scans of Bruce Lee's notes and sell that? Like, so that way people can read it
gangbusters.
and make up their own mind, and they can, you know, organize it in some kind of way by years, by chapter, like the early period, this period, that period. And, you know, why not? I mean, most of the notes have been put out there in some form or another, whether it's in the books, written, or there's scans or photos of it. So why don't they just put it out and make a limited edition version of that, right?
Like, you can get quite a few volumes out of that.
100%. And also, like, his actual notes on the scripts and things that he wrote. Like, you could do the Jeet Kune Do stuff, you could do the movie stuff, you could do so many things, right? And I just feel that there's just a lot of missed opportunities when it comes to monetizing Bruce in the current iteration of the Lee estate. But yeah, so anyway.
We got a very interesting comment from YouTube. Comes from Augusto
All right.
Pinochet.
Okay.
Pinochet?
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 It's a great name.
Pinochet.
That's,
Yes.
I thought he was dead.
I thought so too.
He says, cocaine, C, Bruce.
Wow. I mean, someone went out of their way to comment that on YouTube?
Yeah,
That's brilliant. I mean,
all lowercase.
wow. Wasn't part of the all caps army?
Not part of the all caps army.
Wasn't part of the word salad mafia?
Nope.
Not part of the hot nonsense battalion?
Nah.
That's kind of a mic drop. I mean, one thing about having all these YouTube comments from the Bruce Lee Drug Letters videos, there's a lot of crazy stuff. But then you read a comment like that and you go, there really are some diamonds in the rough.
Way out there.
Yeah. I mean, what do you say to that? That is a mic drop.
This is a mic drop indeed. But
Well,
I got one personal question.
Okay.
It's coming from the Dre.
Mm-hmm.
The real Dre.
The real Dre.
Except no substitutes.
Except no substitutes.
Yes.
So we had a big event here at City Wing Chun this week.
That's right.
The ITC.
That's right.
A lot of people came.
Yes.
And a nice group.
Yes.
Lots of great week of training.
Yes.
You ever think about expanding that thing?
The ITC?
Doing more ITCs.
Well, we have
'Cause-
a winter ITC, but the winter ITC is normally only 3 days. It's like Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And we usually do that when, you know, people get a little lazy over the holidays. And so I traditionally always had a winter ITC, usually the first or second week in January.
One of us spends a month just chilling in Florida.
Hey,
Hey, jealousy will get you everywhere.
you're lucky there's not a Florida man in the room.
That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah, because if there were a Florida man in the room, that Florida man would take offense to what you just said. Yes, every year for the entire month of December, I take a vacation and I drive down from New York to Florida. And I spend the entire month of December in Florida. But do you know what I do when I'm down there? Because you're making it seem like, you know, oh, right? Do you want to know what I do when I'm in Florida? To be quite honest, Mikey, Deane, the sound guy. You want to know?
Yeah, I do.
Pretty much do nothing.
I heard you were hanging out with that other Wing Chun guy down there.
There's that other Wing Chun guy down there.
Can't remember his name. But I
Yeah,
heard you-
Topher, the other Wing Chun guy.
the other Wing Chun
Yeah.
guy. That's that guy.
So, well, to be fair, I go down there. I write articles for Wing Chun Illustrated. I write text for my books. And I pretty much do nothing when I'm down there because I have a pretty busy year. My parents live down there, and I spend... December is kind of, for people who run a martial arts school, December is a slow month for martial arts schools.
That's
right?
very true.
I have a team. I have assistant instructors. I have front end people. So the school can survive for me leaving for a month in the slowest month, and the classes will still go on. So I take that time basically to recharge my batteries. And yes, now I own a home in Florida. So now that I have a home down there, we could potentially do more ITC-like events. People really like the ITC. The summer ITC intensive training camp is 1 week long. It's 7 days. We train 6 hours a day, Monday through Friday, and then we do 4 hours each day on Saturday and Sunday. And yeah, people really like it. And I would like to do more, but not everyone can always get all that time off. So maybe now that I have something in Florida, I'll start doing some events in Florida. So probably in the winter time, because people up here, it gets so cold here in the winter time. So I think we'll probably do wintertime stuff down there, and we could do summertime stuff up here. So yeah, stay tuned. For people who want to do training with me, either here in New York, or if they want to come and train with me down in Florida, or you want to train online, you can go to citywt.com, and we have all those options there, as well as our online shop, my books, and tutorials, monthly theory classes that people can do. So all sorts of stuff. So you can go to citywt.com. And, Dre, you were really in a rare mood today where you were just happened to bring up a bunch of stuff to plug for the school. I feel like you're a different type of Dre.
I woke up this morning not quite feeling myself. Coffee, espresso didn't quite do it for me.
But to be honest, I like this version better.
Yeah, it's a little more articulate.
A little more articulate, yes. And I'm pretty sure it won't take forever to do the intro either.
I reckon so too.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Dre, for coming today. I appreciate it. And that's all I got to say about that.
Word is I'm a kung fu genius. Technique speaks for me, not lineage. Forget Jet Li, cause I'm the one. Many call me seafood, but to you I'm Seagung. And I produce masters. You surpassed us. Your kung fu stiffer than corpse and caskets. City Wing Chun is the house I built. Violate the gate and your blood gets spilt. Alex Richter, always the...
Wow, in 2 takes, and both takes were totally passable. Wow.
Outtake Topher. No.
Unbelievable. Dude, he does it in 2 takes.
Yeah.
This fucking guy right here. The amount of time in my life I will never get back.